Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here, with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 152, which is called It's Time. And this is a very big chapter because some very important stuff happens in it, and it kind of feels like it determines kind of the direction for the series going forward, in that they committed to some very big things in this chapter. Mainly killing the queen and a couple of little connections that they did right at the end there, plus setting up, coming up next I suppose, finally the confrontation we've been waiting a while for, Emma and Ray getting to talk to Norman. So they set that up right at the end, but they set it up with the idea that they're too late, that Norman has accomplished like too much of his goal already. Has he gone too far down that path? Can they bring him back? Is there any hope for him, basically? And the visuals at the end of this chapter, I think, do a really good job at getting that across, as, of course, we see Emma and Ray walk into Norman in a room filled with the corpses of demons. All of the nobles he said he would kill. And obviously on the outside, he's trying to do the same to just the normal demon civilians. So it's a very, dark, kind of brutal, gritty thing that's going on here, and it puts a lot of pressure on the writing coming up next. What is Emma going to say? What's Ray going to say? How's Norman going to respond? Because there's a very interesting point in this chapter where we see potentially an element of doubt from Norman, but it almost seems to be immediately shut down. But the fact that it was there in the first place gives you some hope. But let's go through the chapter here. A lot of little things as well, not just the big stuff to talk about. So we start off with the flashback explaining some stuff about the poison. Gilda is kind of noting that, again, what the poison does is it makes demons degenerate. But they also note from Ray that he told them before he left with Emma that there's no way they were able to manufacture a ton of this poison, so they only could use a small amount of it in a specific area. And Sanju figures out that the best place to use a small amount effectively would be in the central square. So when we get there, we see that there are tons of demons transformed into demon beasts, degenerating, and it's becoming a huge problem. It's already begun. Aishi reports back that none of the other places seem to be affected, but it's sort of spreading a little bit. More and more demons are transforming into demon beasts. A fun little moment here is that Hayato discovers effectively at this point that Aishi can actually speak the human language, which he didn't know before, so he's just discovering in the middle of all of this, Aishi just going around talking to Don and Gilda no problem, whereas when she was with Norman and co, she just acted like she couldn't speak. So kind of cool little thing there, just a fun little interaction. And yeah, we end this side of the story, the Don, Gilda, Sanju, Mujika side of things, with Mujika actually saying, "Then let's go," and Don saying, "Yeah, we can stop the damage," which to me says that on this side of the story, it's probably where they're going to start to reveal some stuff about Mujika and the full extent of what her blood does, why she's so important, why she's so special, why her blood does this special stuff in the first place. Who is she, sort of thing. A lot of big questions need to be answered about her, because as of the end of this chapter, nearly all demons of note have been killed. And the only real demons that are named, that are important, that are left to be explored are Mujika and Sanju. Sanju definitely has a lot coming up, I suppose, that we haven't got to yet. And Mujika herself, they told us a good amount about her, but a lot of it is legendary information almost, rather than she's right here. If she starts to use her blood to heal people, she can explain the scope of what that does, what her powers are. So I assume that's probably what they're doing, because otherwise, how do they know how to counteract the poison? And I assume it is Mujika just being aware of what she can do to help in terms of getting demons back on track. So that'll be fun to see how much they focus on that or not. But anyway, we cut back to the fight that we were waiting for. Zazie delivering this final blow against the queen. who got hit, who didn't get hit, what actually happened. So we get a replay of what happened, of course. Zazie darting down really quick, the Queen slicing through his the bag that was covering his head. Of course, he doesn't get hurt in this. She goes in to deliver a blow with her other hand this time, but the other guy who's there, the guy whose name I always forget, with the X cut into his head, he puts a chain around her arm, stopping her from delivering this blow. And Zazie, we get a full face reveal on him right here. He does manage to deliver a devastating blow right to the Queen's face, to the point where like her eye is effectively hanging out of her head. So she's been mortally wounded here. She's still alive because the eye is still connected, and the important thing is to destroy the eye itself. But she's effectively rendered like out of action as of this point. So the Queen is on the way out, and we'll see what they do with that in just a minute. But let's cover first Zazie's face reveal. They were teasing this for the last few chapters. They don't say anything about it. It's literally just a visual reveal. It's a very much a, here's his face, readers, make of this what you will. No character comments on what any of this means. Now, what we see here is that Zazie actually has a relatively human-looking face overall, the general shape and stuff like that. He has hair, he has eyes, you know, a nose, a mouth, but his eyes are clearly, you know, he has like a black, like his eyes are kind of like almost like reversed in a way. Like the outside of his eye is black, the inside of his eye is white, very much presenting the idea that it's kind of monstrous in a way compared to the rest of him. He also has a very kind of pointy, kind of animalistic teeth. I think, like I predicted last time out, my prediction was that clearly there's an element of demon, like DNA incorporated in here, and that it is part of the Lambda experiments to put demon powers into humans and see what that effect that has. The interesting thing, though, is that Zazie kind of looks like Norman, and I don't know if it's just that it's a, you know, boy character design that kind of ends up looking like Norman, or if that was an actual notable thing that it was meant to look like Norman, because it kind of would make sense with something that the Queen says later on in this chapter about, you know, I sent you to Lambda, and we don't really know the full extent of what sort of experimentation was done on Norman. We know he's like dying, he seems to have the same sort of lingering illness, he won't last that long like the others, but we don't know what really happened to him. Yet here's a character who turns up who was said to be the strongest of humanity, effectively. This unknown character who now is revealed to have like demon eyes and stuff like this, has that demon aspect to him. So is he some sort of a clone of Norman who they experimented on? Which would kind of make sense as we'll get to it, but yeah, the scene of the blow being delivered here, Zazie's sword straight through the Queen's face, really brutal. The art is actually really nice to get it across, but it's pretty gory stuff, so the anime is gonna, I think, pretty cool when it gets around to this. But at this point, with the Queen, they're committing to killing her off here, we get that sort of flashback to explain the Queen's motivations. And what's interesting about it is just that in the grand scheme of things, the Queen is sort of made out like she's not that important in the grand scheme of things. We get just a handful of pages here to explain what she was about. There's a few connections at the end that I think are fairly important, but I think what's in general gotten across with these pages is just that the Queen was always just the kind of corrupt leader of the demons. She represented what was wrong with demon society, with how she was a terrible ruler, didn't really care about her people, was only about herself. And that's gotten across very nicely over these pages. Notice how everything she talks about here on the way out is all about herself. She's the queen of all demons, but she only really talks about herself and what she wants, what she gets out of it. It's what hurts the most. I'm stronger than all, the most beautiful of all. I reign supreme. All must obey me. I have the blood of kings. I want to have the best meat of all. And as she says that, it's a shot of the One. So we see him, the guy who is part of the promise, is promised the best human meat of all. So he with that promise, deprives the Queen of having the best meat, and she wants it because it's the one thing she can't have. So that's an interesting angle on it. But we see a flashback here. I want better meat than the nobles and the kings will have. And we see her killing her father to get the title of queen. She eats him, and it's revealed here that she eats some of her siblings as well. My father, my siblings, all the more food. I took the throne, but although I have almost everything in my hands, one single thing remains far from my grasp. And they cut to an image of Norman when he was younger, but when he was younger doing one of the tests. You can clearly see the number there, and it's her finding out, I suppose, the extent of Norman's abilities. She's told by Averk here, her reaction to what she's just been told. The greatest mind comes from the plantations, and clearly the idea here is that she wanted the best meat of all, and that means she wanted the human child who had the best test scores, and Norman was the smartest, is the smartest. So it makes sense that the ultimate food from their point of view, she wanted to make sure that wasn't going to the one. She was getting that, and that would make her better than the one, better than their god, effectively. So you can see her kind of greedy nature coming out here, but also just connecting to Norman, that she was sort of keeping an eye on him, and that's why some of this happened. But we've cut back to the present day, and we see the queen obviously is still alive here. She's on the ground, of course, but her eye is still connected to her body, so she's still alive even though she's really, really badly injured here. But she can still communicate because that sort of core of who she is, the eye is still there. Norman walks up to her, standing above her, like she's just this eye connected to a dead body at this point. She's on the bottom, Norman's standing above her. She finally gets to see in front of her the object that she's wanted for all of this time, the best meat of all. It's really well done, given that it's just been revealed. And Norman's just like, "It was pleased to meet you, Your Highness." And she says, "I see, so you are the puppet master, 22194. Oh, how appetizing he is. I'm the one who sent you to Lambda. I loathed the idea of offering you to the one. I want to eat you." And she begins to freak out as she knows it's over for her. "Eat you, eat you, eat you." She switches to speaking in the demon language at this point and says, "I've always wanted to eat you so much. When I learned Lambda was sacked and burned, I lost myself in rage. And now here you are, alive, right before my eyes. I shan't bestow you to anyone. You are my meat, mine and mine alone." And Norman's response is, "Your meat?" So he can understand demon language here. And then he speaks to her in the demon language and says, "None of us will ever be food for the likes of you again. Do it, Zazie." And just panel after he says it, Zazie, no hesitation, stabs the queen right in the eye. The queen has been killed. There's no question about it at all. The queen is dead. Just really suddenly, brutal. Norman was having none of that. The queen, her last thing that she says was, "I want to eat you." And that is the exact thing that Norman and all of his group were against, was just the way demons, especially the high up demons, acted around the way that they eat humans. And the fact that in the end, that's all the queen was kind of about, was just trying to get the best meat possible. And Norman just had no time for that, and so just had her killed. There was no conversation to be had here. She was all just about eating the meat, and just seeing him only as meat as well was the very telling one. They turned to Averk. "You're the last one. Just kill Averk and it's over. The noble's dead, the leadership destroyed. The common demons will have no other fate than extermination. It all ends now." And so it looks like Norman's plan is about to be completely completed here. Averk is the last notable demon left to kill, apart from Sanju and Mujika. And as I suppose they move in to do this, it's like this kind of almost crisis of conscience happens here at this point. Norman just glances back. It's this kind of vision he almost has, and he sees a younger Emma. It looks like about a 5-year-old Emma or so, just tugging on his cloak, and she has a very sad look on her face. And standing beside young Emma is a similarly aged Norman, so a younger version of himself with the same sad, disappointed look on their face. And he focuses in on what the expression on Emma's face, and we look back and we see Emma's crying in his cloak, and we cut away from it immediately, but it's just this moment of like, right as he was about to step over that line, and it's revealed that he does, but right as he was about to do that, he does remember, he sort of knows that in doing this, he is stepping away from who he used to be. He's stepping away from, I suppose, potentially, from his point of view, any chance of Emma and him still agreeing on things and being on the same side. It's very, very interesting, especially with where the chapter ends. But we cut to Emma, and we see her kind of as she makes her way to arrive. How late is she? We already know how late she is, but we'll just see from her point of view how late she is. And then interestingly, they just reveal Ray is here with her. Now, maybe it was me making too big of a deal about this, but like a chapter or two ago when we saw Ray kind of being like, oh, I'll find another way to catch up with you. I'll boost you up into the vents. You get there as soon as possible. I'll catch up. That plot point was just there for like no real reason, because Ray is just here. There was no plot point that was really in any way related to like Emma being ahead of Ray, because they just walk into the room at the same time here. So either way, the whole idea is Emma saying, we've already made the promise, it's all right, you don't have to fight anymore, Norman. She finally makes her way to the room where basically the last bunch of chapters have taken place. This whole bloodbath has taken place in this room. Emma finally makes her way to the room. Is she on time? Is she on time? Of course not. She walks in, sees this room covered, like piled high with the corpses of demons. All these important demons that Norman said he would take out, and he did it. Norman just standing there at the end of the room, one of the only living people in the room, as like there's the corpse of like the nobles' families, there's the corpse of the queen, Iverk has been killed off panel and stuff like that. He's done exactly what he said he would do, and we get the narration here, his heart unmoved, and he just says, I'm sorry, it's too late now, Emma. And we're left with just the idea of, oh, I don't think we really expected it to go this way. I kind of expected Emma and Ray to like show up in the middle of some sort of a demon conflict going on. I didn't expect it to be like this, where everyone would be gone and the only people left are the humans. Like, there's no threat as such here. It's just Norman and Emma are going to get a chance to talk. Ray is with her, and of course Norman has his like lieutenants and so on still there. We don't know what Barbara's condition is. She was stabbed, it was pretty brutal, but because she's Lambda, she could have like accelerated healing or something like that. Either way, they haven't addressed what's up with her, but either way, like Vincent's there, Zazie is still there, the other guy whose name I always forget with the X cut into his like hairstyle, he's still there, and of course Norman. So what's going on here? Are we getting in terms of action, like are we going to see a fight between these two groups effectively? I'm not sure, because immediately the way I'm thinking is that somewhere along the line, Sanju and Mujika are going to have to jump into play. Sanju is going to become a focus in some way. I don't know exactly what way they're going to do it, but the way they showed his abilities a bunch of chapters ago, he is kind of... He's that level. He's right up there with some of the best, most powerful demons that we've seen. So if he decides to go against the humans, can they stop him, I suppose, is the question. I think that's the level that he's meant to be at. And because they haven't for a very long time addressed his overall motivations, which are that he wants humans to get back on track so they have a sort of power of their own, so that they are not food anymore and there is actually a thrill to hunting them, and he can find some honor in actually hunting and taking them out and eating them in the way like things used to be. Is he going to judge that with how dominant like Norman was in this conflict, that time has come, that humans are now like up for an actual hunt, and we could see him jump to being like almost like the main villain in a way? I don't know what way they do that without kind of cutting like the legs out of the kind of Norman Emma sort of conflict that's going on here, but I think that is something to look out for, that all those chapters ago we did have that sort of gleam in Sanju's eye when he talked about wanting to hunt and actually eat humans in like the proper way, if there is a proper way. And then with Mujika, so much that needs to come out about like her ability, what's going to happen there. But it's not all hope lost, I think, is the main thing here. Norman's plan was like a combination of wanting to kill the demon higher-ups and the queen, and also then to kill everyone, wipe out all of the demons. He's accomplished one part of that goal, and that is wiping out all of the royal and noble family heads and stuff like that. There's no going back from that. He's done that. But there's still a large part of the demon population left to save, and it seems like on the outside, Don, Gilda, Sanju, Mujika are trying to do that. And then we'll see if Norman has a second stage to his plan or anything like that to take out the rest of them. But either way, it seems like he has so many powerful characters on his side, there's very few demons who could go up against him. The promise, of course, still has to be revealed, exactly what it was. Was there any, like, has Norman doing any of this changed the way the promise plays out or not? When's that going to come out? Like how many chapters do we have left? There's so many questions because of how, big, monumental nearly everything that happens in the series is going on now, and that it still feels like there's probably a flashback to what happened in Lambda to come to further explain why Norman is so far down this path, because they haven't really connected the dots a lot between Norman being in Lambda and being alive, and then his like escape from Lambda and having this power and being a menace to demons. They haven't connected the dots fully yet, and it still feels like we need to explain, like, okay, that's what Zazie looks like, but could you for sure confirm to us what exactly we're seeing here? And the same with the others, like what experimentation has been done in them, what was the aim of Lambda in a way. So there's so much stuff still at play here, but the main thing coming up next, though, is what is the dialogue going to be like between Emma and Norman? What do they say to each other here? How does Emma react to the fact that she now knows she's standing in a room where the carnage in front of her was ordered directly by Norman? That one of her childhood best friends has just ordered people and manipulated into hundreds of people being killed, and the results are right on the floor in front of her. Like, it's such a dark thing of like, can Norman come back from this? Is there any hope? And then the fact that we like know that he's dying and stuff like that, it adds so many layers to, is Norman just willing to, like from before, willing to sacrifice himself for everything, like Norman did in like the first arc. He was willing to sacrifice himself to allow Ray and Emma to escape. Now is he willing to do that again, but like sacrifice himself, kind of mind, body, and soul, to end the demon threat? Even though Emma knows that there's more to demons than just the bad of the leadership, effectively. And I think that's the interesting thing in all of this. Right now, this is the part of Norman's plan where I think you could ultimately like agree with like what's happened here, in that if any of the nobles had survived and were attempted to be incorporated into whatever's next for demon leadership, it probably would have went back to the way things were. It probably will result in things being better for demons, full stop, that you have taken out most of the corrupt leadership that has made things the way they are right now. And that whatever is next for them, it's either going to be the introduction of a new character, or Sanju or Mujika taking over as some sort of a leader of the demons. Now that all that matters is really protecting the demons' civilization that is left, and whatever way they do that. So I think the series is at a really, really interesting point here, in that they can go so many places, because the conflict that we went into this thinking of is kind of over. There's no obvious demon threat left, unless Sanju immediately steps up to be the opposition to humanity. But I can't see them doing that immediately. But so so many questions. That's why the discussion's going on for a little bit. But I think it's great that there is so much to discuss in this chapter. But yeah, I guess I'll turn things over to you guys. What are your thoughts on chapter 152? Where do you think things are going next? What were your thoughts on some of the reveals in this chapter? What is your interpretation of the visuals of like Zaze's face? Is it just demon DNA, demon experimentation, or what? What do you think is going to happen next? Let me know in the comments, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.